Outside, it was friendly handshakes for the South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, but once inside the Oval Office, the ambush quickly followed.
Turn the lights down and just put this on. It's right behind you.
President Trump had lined up more than 5 minutes of videos of black South African politicians, including the former president, Jacob Zuma, calling for violence against white farmers. Designed entirely to put the country's president right on the spot in front of the world's media and back up Trump's claim that white South Africans are victims of an ongoing genocide.
Man, these are burial sites right here. Burial sites. Over 1,000 of white farmers. Those people were all killed.
Have they told you where that is, Mr. President? No, I'd like to know where that is, because this I've never seen.
That contested video played on, and Ramaphosa pointedly refused at times to look up at the screen. But Trump continued.
Our government policy is completely against what he was saying.
But you do allow them to take land.
No.
You do allow them to take land.
Nobody can take land.
And then when they take the land, they kill the white farmer. And when they kill the white farmer, nothing happens to them.
No, there is quite...
Nothing happens to them.
In fact, police statistics show that black farm workers are being killed at a higher rate than white farmers.
Welcome. Welcome to the United States of America.
But so convinced is Trump of his statistics that last week his administration welcomed 59 white South Africans to America, granting them refugee status on the basis they were being persecuted at home. Many of the new arrivals were allegedly farmers. And this is the land that's at the centre of the dispute. Trump claims white Afrikaners who ruled during apartheid are being discriminated against by a new law that allows their land to be seized by the South African government without compensation. But the government says it's about ensuring the land is shared among all people and redressing the imbalance that sees white South Africans, just 7% of the population, own half its farmland.
Right, so there is fertile farmland that is owned by farmers that are using it productively to feed the country.
But it's white farmers, you'll acknowledge.
Well, they are good at farming. They're the best farmers in the world. We're very lucky to have them.
Katia runs an organisation that advises Afrikaners now seeking refugee status in the US and says she is also among them.
I feel hopeless and terrified. So when Trump came through with this executive order and offered a ray of hope to South Africans like me, it's really, really just given us hope.
Death, 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 horrible death.
Trump's claims about violence against white South Africans aren't new. He said the same during his last administration, only this time he has a white South African by the name of Elon Musk as his right-hand man. Musk may have stepped back from government, but he was in the room today to witness the dressing down of his country's president in the latest episode of the White House ambush.
Well, let's take a closer look at some of the claims President Trump made about South Africa. Joining me now from Johannesburg is the political journalist and broadcaster Stephen Crutus. Now, let's look first at that video of the crosses. Trump, repeated the fake claim of Elon Musk that these were the graves of murdered white farmers. What were they looking at, in fact?
Well, from what I can work out, Christian, good evening, they were looking at a monument that's called Witkruis, or Plaas Moorde, which effectively means in Afrikaans sort of farm murders. And as I understand it, in fact, it commemorates, the crosses each commemorate the death of one black or white farmer. So, in other words, it's not just a monument for white farmers, it's a monument for all people killed on farms, or farmers. I mean, we have a very large number of black farmers in South Africa too, and many of them have been the victims of violence in rural areas. So that's what we were looking at. In terms of the cavalcade of cars, like President Ramaphosa, like my president, I haven't seen that before. From time to time, various interest groups in South Africa who maybe work in agriculture, maybe work for the Afrikaans lobby group AfriForum. When I say Afrikaans lobby group, I'm talking really about a group with perhaps 100,000 members. It's very well organized, and they certainly have the ear of the Trump administration, but they cannot claim to speak for Afrikaans people or any kind of ethnic group in South Africa. And they have arranged meetings like this or memorials like this. But I must just stress, Christian, in my view, President Trump is searching for white victims to justify his own domestic agenda. And in South Africa, violence affects black and white people. And the people most likely to be the victims of violence by far are young black men.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, if you look at the figures of farmers, black and white, killed, the murders seem to be lower than in the general population.
Actually, yes, that's in fact true. It is lower. I mean, there's sort of several groups of people in South Africa who are vulnerable to murder in terms of the sheer numbers. So we have a huge problem with femicide, the killing of women. But in terms of sheer numbers, it's young black men in particular circumstances, followed by police officers. Farmers and people in rural areas and people who work on farms are far below that in terms of the actual numbers. So you really are looking at sort of the kind of typical system that politicians use all the time, I suppose, where they'll take certain facts, look at certain pictures, give them a certain power and say, this must mean ABC. In the South African context where violence, unfortunately, and violent crime is an everyday problem, certain groups are more vulnerable than others. Yeah. Farmers are not among those groups. And I must just say, AfriForum, the group to which I referred, does not believe there is a white genocide either.
Right. How is this sort of White House Oval Office showdown going to go down in South Africa? I mean, the President Ramaphosa kept his composure. He was cracking jokes about not having a plane to give Trump. Will this be seen as a humiliation or that he handled it well?
I think there'll be a few debates about this. Some people went into this meeting thinking the President Ramaphosa's main priority was probably to avoid the kind of Zelenskyy confrontation. I would probably be among those. There will be some people who I think feel, and this is a legitimate feeling, that President Trump is really all about race, that he has tried to humiliate President Ramaphosa and may well have succeeded. I think, though, that a lot of people are also going to think that Ramaphosa did the right thing by taking a delegation of people. For every formerly white South African like Elon Musk, there's a white South African like Ernie Els or Johan Rupert who may disagree with the president on certain politics, but is prepared to speak up for South Africa and to speak up for the truth. And I think, looking at it, that was probably a very clever stroke by Ramaphosa to take people, strange as it may seem, Christian, to whom President Trump will actually listen.
Now, they did also show, though, videos of Julius Malema and Zuma, which are incendiary, racist, insightful. How will it play with their supporters? You know, is this going to help them?
Yeah, in a way, yes. So, I mean, Julius Malema and I recall being at a Lutuli House press conference with yourself, reporting on him many years ago. But in fact, Julius Malema now is his political party, the party which he leads, is the fourth biggest in our parliament. It has 10% of the vote. And through all of the time that he's been using that phrase, Dibulu Ibunu, or in English, it's translated as kill the Boer, the translation is not exact. He's actually lost support. So in the last few elections, we've seen him lose momentum and lose support. It is true that former President Jacob Zuma has sung it, I think, once or twice. When he was president, he certainly didn't support Malema in singing it in terms of actually doing that. His political party has around 14% of the vote. And so far, it has not really gained them support. It's not something that has worked for them, and particularly for Julius Malema. What I think we're going to see, though, is that Malema already has put out a statement tonight talking about, and this is sort of his phrasing, a group of old white men meeting in Washington, decided to gossip about me without me being there. He will try and claim some sort of attention for this.
Stephen?
But in reality, his policy and his strategy of sort of targeting white people has not won him mass support. And for the moment, I don't see that changing.
Stephen Croesus, thank you very much indeed.